there. It's Gary Parrish. Welcome back to the CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what to do to that like button. Shouts to Brandon Davies. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel, it would be awesome if you also did that while you're here. Let's get into it. Today, we are continuing our summer shoot-around series with an episode on Hubert Davis's North Carolina Tar Heels. And Joe Ovies is going to join me momentarily to help me get through it. He's been a prominent sports media member in the Triangle for a while. He's on X at Joe Ovies. That's Joe, O-V-I-E-S. But before I bring Joe in, first, let me quickly recap last season for you. After starting at number 9 in the AP poll, the Tar Heels went 23-14 last season, including 13-7 in the ACC. Finished tied for 4th in the league standings. That was 6 games back of first place Duke. They controversially got an 11 seed in the NCAA tournament, then beat San Diego State in the first 4 before losing to Ole Miss 71-64 in the round of 64 of the NCAA tournament. From that team, basically every meaningful player other than Seth Trimble is gone, most notably RJ Davis and Ian Jackson. But the Tar Heels still have a compelling roster thanks to the additions of Alabama transfer Jaron Stevenson, Arizona transfer Henry Vasar, and a top 5 freshman class highlighted by 5-star forward Caleb Wilson. That's among the reasons I got North Carolina 25th in the top 25-1 right now. We're going to see what Joe Ovies thinks about that next. But first, let's get a word from our partners. As promised, Joe Ovies is here with me now. He, of course, is one of the hosts of Ovies and Giglio alongside Joe Giglio. The show originates in the Triangle, specifically, I believe, from Raleigh, North Carolina. My first question for you, what's it like to do a podcast with somebody who shares your same first name? Is it inspired by the success of Mike and Mike once upon a time?
Well, unfortunately, there's already a radio show here in North Carolina that goes by Two Guys Named Chris. Okay. So that eliminated my initial idea of two guys named Joe, right?
Okay.
So we just keep it simple, man. We decided in terms of SEO, the easiest thing for us to do is to go by our last names, which are incredibly easy to spell, Ovies and Giglio. OG for sure. We just go by the OG. If you're watching on YouTube, you got the hat, we got the OG, little North Carolina inspiration here. So that's how we keep it simple.
Well, I'm a big fan of watching any former radio guy transition into the what is more commonly referred to as the podcast world. So welcome aboard.
Yeah, man. The content mines never stops. Let's go.
Let's go. So before we get into this North Carolina team and what to expect this upcoming season, first talk to me what I guess is the biggest topic of conversation connected to the program, and that's probably the head coach, Hubert Davis. He's heading into year 5 after replacing Roy Williams. The first 4 years have been, let's just say, interesting. 3 NCAA tournament appearances, 2 Sweet 16s, 1 trip to the national title game. That's all pretty good stuff. But they did finish 7th in the ACC in year 2, missed the NCAA tournament then. And then last year in year 4, underachieved, preseason top 10 team, barely snuck into the NCAA tournament, and not without controversy.
Yeah.
Is this a do-it-or-else season for Hubert Davis? How confident are you that he makes it to year 6?
Yeah, short answer, it is a must-win season for North Carolina and Hubert Davis. The one thing that outside listeners might not understand about the Triangle, and something that Giglio likes to bring up all the time, is that nothing in our market happens in a vacuum. Duke is not operating because of what they feel is good for Duke. They're keeping an eye on what's happening at North Carolina, vice versa. So any conversation we have about Hubert Davis in North Carolina is directly tied to what's happening with Jon Scheyer and Duke. Now, there's a wrinkle in 2025 because, Gary, you know this. You've been doing this as long as I've been doing it. And I can go back to old columns of yours back in the day. NC State has not been a player for 25 plus years. I can go back to when they moved on from Herb Sendek, you included, saying, well, what does NC State expect? And they've been wandering through the wilderness since, outside of the one magical 2024 where Kevin Keatts finally broke NC State stuff. We call it something else that starts with an S, but he finally stuffed the stuff, as he said. But what it did was it allowed NC State to have an opportunity to go and get Will Wade, who had promised 2 years at McNeese, right? Had they moved on from Kevin Keatts while he's at McNeese that first year, and he was almost fired at the ACC tournament before they went and won the thing and went to the Final Four, they would not have had an opportunity to go to Will Wade. So the reason why I'm bringing up NC State is because of that. Nothing in the triangle happens in a vacuum. For the first time in my lifetime, either living here or working in this market, NC State's put the money behind basketball, the money people, the booster people. There was something about 2024 that made grown men cry and say out loud, you know what? We're a basketball school. Let's stop acting like we can be a football school. Let's invest. And they went out and got the guy, okay? There was no Heisman. There was no sabotage. There was none of that stuff. They got the guy. So if they're playing the game at NC State, and Duke's already been playing the game better than anybody else, in my opinion, well, all eyes turn to Hubert Davis in North Carolina. They have not been playing the game. And you just kind of laid it out. Let's just bottom line it. Mm-hmm. 3 of the last 4 years, North Carolina has been a bubble team. Is that the standard at North Carolina? Absolutely not. And while all of the talk can be around Bill Belichick right now, I'm going to tell you something that former Governor Roy Cooper told us here in this studio a couple of weeks ago. He's now running for Senate, but he was in the studio. We were talking Bill Belichick and hoops. He said, yeah, Bill's job is to keep us from talking about basketball as long as possible. So you can have all that stuff going on at Keenan, but at the end of the day, they care about what's happening in basketball, and they are not going to let it atrophy. And unfortunately for Hubert Davis in the last, going into this 5th year, they've been caught flat-footed. There's been a refusal to adapt. They still think they're operating in a world where the shorts matter, that Jordan brand is the thing, and that's all you need to get a guy here. No, Duke very much trailblazed with Jon Scheyer out of the gate, and there's been some trepidation as to, well, what are we doing going forward? And as much as and I'm sure in the chat, North Carolina fans will tell you this, and they're probably asking you, hey, Gary, why are you talking to a state guy about Carolina? Well, I think it's because I'm here telling you about the real dynamics, actual dynamics at play here in the triangle rather than the Pollyanna-ish stuff. And as much as North Carolina fans can sit here and tell you about what happened in the Final Four back in 2022, Duke's not thinking about that anymore, man. Right. They moved on with their lives. Right now, Carolina fans sound like, they peaked in high school. Like, hey, man, remember that time I threw 4 touchdowns? Remember that? Honestly, they sounded a lot like NC State fans who wouldn't stop talking about 1983. So everybody's moved on except Carolina, and I think this is the year where it finally comes to a head for Hubert Davis.
And I agree with every bit of that. And it's obviously important that he takes what I think is a top 25-ish roster and turns it into a top 25, consistent top 25 team, if not better. Mm-hmm. Because I think everybody likes Hubert and everybody respects Hubert. I don't want to speak for you, but I find him to be likable. I find him to be, I understand why he got the job. Mm-hmm. But heading into year 5, there is undeniable pressure, and it seems everybody can agree on this. If this doesn't go well, this will be it.
Yes.
The question for me would be, and I'm going to ask this to you, what does well even look like, and how much does it matter? Because, he can win X amount of games, finish top 5 in the ACC, bounce in the NCAA tournament, win a game, you eliminated in the round of 32. My question at a place like North Carolina has always been something along these lines. Regardless of what somebody did in year 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 last year, or expected to do next year, you should be at a place like North Carolina asking yourself some version of this question. Do we have one of the best coaches in the country? We should. We're North Carolina. We are North Carolina. We should have one of the best coaches in the country. And if you ask that question right now, what kind of answer would you get? And I say this again as somebody who is respectful. But could even the most diehard North Carolina fan intelligently argue right now that they have one of the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 best coaches in the sport, because you do have one of the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 best programs in the sport, or at least you're supposed to.
Yeah, you are supposed to. And I listen to Eye on College Basketball. I know you have brought that up, and I don't disagree with you, but there's also some market realities here as well.
Okay.
You know, we talked to Bubba Cunningham, outgoing athletics director at North Carolina, this week, or whenever. I think this is now last week when this is running. So we talked to Bubba about a bunch of different things, 30 minutes worth of conversation with Bubba. He's always great with us. And we got around to what are the expectations around Hubert Davis. And I actually go back to a conversation we had with Bubba Cunningham after the announcement of Hubert Davis as the head coach. 2 things. One, we come to find out that that Bubba Cunningham did make calls to what you would consider some of the best coaches in college basketball. Mm-hmm. It's just that they weren't in a place that they wanted to go to North Carolina. We've heard this before, by the way. History doesn't rhyme, it repeats. Roy Williams was in that same position. Now a little bit different dynamics because Roy Williams was coming home, but the dynamics at Kansas led that, well, you know what? I gotta write it out with this group. And it wasn't until a change in AD and that group was done that he finally had to come home and save the Carolina basketball program. Well, I think the same thing happened here too with Hubert Davis, in that Bubba Cunningham made the right calls to the right people. They just said no, just not right now. Okay, so then when those options are expired, all right, what do you do next? Well, then you go to the family guy. You go to the one that Roy Williams likely pushed for in the grand scheme of things. But I don't know if Hubert Davis has been properly supported, okay? Because I get back to the through line through all of this. Have you modernized your program? Breaking from Roy Williams should have played out the same way that you broke from Mike Krzyzewski. That you've built up this brand. You have one of the top basketball programs in the country, but as we know, and we've seen it at North Carolina, actually, we've seen it now kind of play out twice. Just because you're out of blue blood doesn't necessarily mean you're just going to be a turnkey operation. One of the more hilarious things that I remember with Roy Williams, despite the fact that he won 3 national championships, was those anonymous coaches things that you guys used to do. They always viewed Roy Williams as an overrated coach. It was like Carolina. He recruits. Well, recruiting is part of it.
Sure.
And if it was so easy to win at North Carolina, please explain Matt Doherty, who got recruits, but then they all hated him, right? So I think the same thing's playing out with Hubert Davis, but with a little bit of a different wrinkle, either because of him or because of the Carolina family dynamics. There wasn't a clean break. Hubert Davis is an extension of Roy Williams and the Carolina family, whereas John Shire is John Shire, right? It's his program, the way he wants to run it. I'm not so sure that Hubert Davis has necessarily been able to do that. And if he has, then I can objectively say he has not done a very good job of breaking from that old mold and modernizing. Brendan Marks of The Athletic did a very fascinating deep dive highlighting all the ways that North Carolina had been behind the curve, like just behind the trends of college basketball, and how this past year they've done their best efforts to catch up to that. I mean, come on, guys. That should have been taking place a couple of years ago. Maybe you wouldn't find yourself in this position. I also think that messaging for Hubert, I'm with you. I like Hubert Davis, but to the point where I wish I could help Hubert Davis. I don't think his messaging has been all that good. He has not been as open when given opportunities to be open about stuff. Let's look at the general manager position as an example of that. He says on his radio show, I recognize that the game has changed and we're going to get a general manager. This is on the radio show. He then has a press availability shortly after that where somebody asked him, a follow-up to that. He's like, I don't want to talk about that because things get misconstrued. Okay, that's interesting. And they do hire a general manager, but they hire a general manager that, again, has very deep Roy Williams family-esque connections. Go look at Jim Tanner, who I'm sure is a nice guy. He's long time, in basketball world, but look at all the guys he represented. They're like all Carolina guys. Okay. They're all connected to Roy Williams in some form or fashion that era. It's not what happened at Duke, where they got a Nike exec who understands how the game is played. You see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
And then there's also the messaging that's also not helping Hubert Davis. They had a contract extension that apparently had just been sitting there for a while. And it wasn't until things were getting a little dicey on the bubble until they pulled the lever on, hey, by the way, he's got an extension. Remember that?
Yes.
That was kind of weird, right?
Right.
That was kind of weird. And then we get to this offseason, which I think is the biggest tell. And Greg Barnes, who is a very long time UNC media guy with Inside Carolina, he wrote when everything was done with the roster. He wrote, I'm paraphrasing here, there has been unprecedented financial commitment to the basketball program. So any excuse that you might have about how we're not financially supported, well, that's out the window. I remember getting into a debate with Matt Norlander about this, where apparently Hubert Davis had to go talk to some big money guys. Gary, this is Carolina basketball. Right. Since when does the basketball coach have to beg for money? You see what I'm getting at?
Right.
Unless there's buy-in. So all these things, unfortunately, for Hubert Davis, I feel like things are set up for him to fail because the messaging has already been laid out. We've given you everything you need. You better go win. And if you don't, well, then you're going to be shown the door. So the vibes, if you want to use the kids' parlance here, the vibes are off around Hubert Davis and this program right now. And the only solution for it is to win.
I should say I am understanding of the challenges of going out and trying to hire a coach in this era of college basketball. Once upon a time, you're North Carolina, you're Kentucky, you could kind of go by even other power conference coaches because not everybody was spending millions of dollars on basketball staffs. You know, even when I started into this career, but now like at the power conference level, everybody's rich. And if you are really good in a power conference, and I don't mean really good at Kentucky or really good at Indiana, the traditionally strong basketball programs. I mean, if you're really good at a power conference program, they are probably compensating you incredibly well and are willing to match anybody dollar for dollar. And that is why, or at least among the reasons why, you know, when the Kentucky job most recently opened, they ended up hiring somebody who has never at that time won an NCAA tournament game.
Yeah.
Duke hired an assistant by design, but still an assistant. Arizona hired an assistant. Syracuse hired an assistant. Louisville hired a mid-major coach. Virginia hired a mid-major coach. Like, it is very difficult to just go out and hire your, quote, top 5 coach in the country. I acknowledge that, but that is the type of thing, if I were in charge of decisions at North Carolina, I would be asking myself, we are supposed to be one of the best basketball programs in the country. Do we have the basketball coach that lines up with that? Perhaps that's not even
fit. I think what you're talking about is fit, right? You know, like Mark Pope, you mentioned Mark Pope. He is the perfect coach for Kentucky right now, coming off of what had happened with Calipari, right?
It seems like it.
And I think in the case of John Shire, he is young, energetic, and is allowing to he is allowed to understand that in order to get the types of recruits that you want, in order to continue the success, you have to play a different game, which I think they're doing very, very well. You know, I don't think, based on getting to the Final Four and all that stuff, some people would tell you, well, I don't think John Shire is one of the best coaches in college basketball right now. Well, then how does he keep doing this? Well, there's a buy-in. Everybody's in sync right now at Duke. That's been my biggest issue with North Carolina in the Hubert Davis era. I think this is for the first time, if I look at the roster correctly, outside of a guy like Seth Trimble, I mean, we're really talking about a whole new bunch of dudes.
Yes.
Okay. I would have preferred, I know in retrospect, it's going to sound like I'm a crazy person to say that they should have had a clean break in Hubert's first year with a brand spanking new kind of lineup with his guys. They ended up getting to the Final Four, but let's not, and beating Duke and getting in the championship game, but let's not misremember what that season was. Okay. I mean, that was a miracle of March. It was an incredible run. Don't get me wrong, but let's go back and objectively look at what their season was before they went on this run. And you saw with some of those same dynamics playing out, RJ Davis, Armando Bacot, you had some friction. Last time we saw that was a Roy Williams team after the 2009 championship. You go from 2009 to 10, that was a group where you had the next group coming up with some of the leftovers. There was a little bit of a mismatch there, and you saw what ended up happening that year. They weren't on the same page. They ended up getting to the NIT. Of course, Duke wins the championship back in 2010. So I would have preferred Hubert to have a clean break. I would have preferred it last year. Instead, RJ Davis comes back. And RJ, like at some point, man, you got to leave the nest. You're just too old to be playing college basketball, right? And allow somebody like Elliot Cadeau to develop. Okay, well, that didn't necessarily happen. Now Elliot Cadeau's gone. Same thing with Ian Jackson, right? Too many cooks, man. Too many cooks. What are you going to do? You got a reigning ACC player of the year. I mean, like, you going to take him off the floor, right? So Ian Jackson's development wasn't necessarily there. So I'm looking at the roster now in that you went and solved the problems that were, the problems that kept you from elevating last year, and that's on the front court. But of course, now there's some questions about the guard position. Who's going to run point? I'm assuming Kyan Evans is going to adapt well to what Hubert Davis wants him to do. But you go out and get Visar, who I know everybody's excited about. But these are all known quantities. The thing that I still don't know about with Hubert Davis is how do you develop freshmen? Again, this gets back to the nothing happens in a vacuum, right? I kind of know how John Shire's running things with his freshmen. He has no problem with the guy. I'm sure we'll see it with the Boozer twins again this year. But Caleb Wilson, right? I have not seen Caleb Wilson in person yet, but apparently he's the real deal.
Right.
I have not seen anything from Hubert Davis's track record that would tell me that he's going to take the governor off Caleb Wilson and let him do his thing, right? So these are things that I think a lot of Carolina fans are looking at. And how do you manage this roster with a bunch of new guys? There's not a lot of loyalty. It might go against, you don't have time to develop anymore. This is something that Bubba Cunningham told us this week when he talked about how things used to work at Carolina. You would have opportunities to develop. Well, the development starts now. So you don't have the opportunity to have Ian Jackson come back a following year. Expectations are up now on him at St. John. So the same thing happens with Caleb Wilson. What are his minutes going to be? How crucial is he going to be? I mean, I think everybody understands he's an X factor, right? They might be a little old school this year where you're going to, you're running, you're getting your front guys basically you're running your offense like it used to be, right? So I'll be curious to see if that happens. I don't know. And those are all the things that are kind of jumbling around with North Carolina basketball right now. Why we talk about Hubert Davis the way that we do. It's just a lot of uncertainty.
So by my count, 8 of the top 9 scorers from last season are gone. The only one back, Seth Trimble. As you noted publicly, it's been made pretty clear. North Carolina basketball is being supported extremely well financially. The program has hired a general manager. They went into the class of 2025 and got a top 10 prospect in Caleb Wilson. Also go into the transfer portal and go and get Kyan Evans out of Colorado State, somebody who shot above 44% from 3 last season for an NCAA tournament team. Go get Jaron Stevenson out of Alabama. Go get Henry Vasar out of Arizona. When the fans, because you would have a better idea of this than I am.
You haven't talked about Luka yet. Is it Bogovac?
Yes, right. So they go out and they do well in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Are North Carolina fans happy, pleased, satisfied with the roster that's been put in place, given the money that we believe has been spent?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because this is another thing that I jotted down and how the messaging around Hubert Davis is a little wonky right now, right? So, I you know me, man, I consume a lot of media. So I'll listen to you guys. I'll listen to some other college basketball focused podcasts. And some of the reaction to their offseason moves has been, this is what you spent on this roster, like in a almost dismissive way.
That is mostly what I've heard, but I would rather hear it from somebody who's got boots on the ground in the triangle every day.
Well, let me ask this, okay? Who determines value right now?
Yeah.
We don't know anything. The price is the price, right? There's no salary cap. If we're talking about the Carolina Hurricanes, well, I know what the cap is. You better do what you need to do with the cap. There ain't no cap right now. So, we don't, people say, well, this is what Duke spent on their roster. This is what we know Duke spent on the roster. We don't know the compensation packages, right? So, like, we'll use Cooper Flagg as a prime example of this. Do we think that the final tally for Cooper Flagg was whatever it is that might be floating out there that Duke paid? Of course not, because Cooper Flagg got paid like a coach gets paid these days. You have your base that comes from the school, and then everything else is a compensation package from a variety of different outlets. Like, it's pretty wild to me. I brought up Caleb Wilson. You know what? I think this just came out, where I might have missed it because I've been in football mode here lately. I didn't realize he signed with New Balance.
Right.
Tell me it's a new day in Chapel Hill where the top recruit ain't wearing J's?
Right.
That's what you're telling me? That's what you're telling me, right? Where Roy Williams gets so many samples of Jordans that I wish he was a size 13 like me, because he's told me, do you want some?
Right.
I wish you don't have 13s. This is a bummer. So it at least indicates to me that Carolina's willing to play a little bit of a different game now, that this guy's a New Balance kid. Now, you obviously can't wear those around Jordan because we understand that's when he'll take it personal.
Right.
But I'm just using that to illustrate a point where at Duke, it doesn't matter if Cooper Flag's a New Balance guy, because it's Duke, it's a business. But at Carolina, man, it's a little different. So getting back to the value aspect of it, we don't know what the value is for these guys, because we don't know the value of any of these guys. I feel like it's a beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You know, there are some players, Gary, you and I both know, that are not worth what they ended up getting on the open market.
Sure.
And Carolina has decided we ain't playing that game, or they're willing to match the money, but then there's some other issues or some other asks that Carolina goes, no, we ain't doing that. And you see the production that goes along with it, and you look back at Carolina and go, yeah, probably for the best you didn't get this guy. I'm not going to say who it is, but I'm sure some Carolina fans can connect some dots on who I'm talking about that they lost, that, I don't know, might be watching Secret Lives of Mormon Wives for all I know. But that's another story altogether. So I asked the question, who says it's overpaying?
Right.
You pay what you have to pay, because that's the price of poker, man.
Right.
And if it ends up being a little bit more than you're comfortable with, well, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if they don't spend this money to get the roster that you're kind of on, can you imagine the roster they've had if they didn't spend money?
That's
so
the thing.
I push back on this business of trying to assign value to a basketball roster, because nobody knows what the limit is.
And at the end of the day, the price that you spent will only matter if it's not good.
Right.
If the team's good, nobody will ever get caught up on how much money was spent on this roster again.
No.
But if the team's bad, that's when it will get thrown up in your face over and over again. Think of it as a Major League Baseball free agent, NBA free agent who signed some big contract. As long as they're good, we never mention the money again.
Yeah.
The second they're not good, we start pointing to the contract and saying they're overpaid and blah, blah, blah. And that's the same way this will go. You did say something that coincidentally, I'd had a conversation with a coach in recent weeks. Okay. It was a conversation. We were talking NIL and, you know, how it's changed and where it's going. And he just said, like, GP, because I've been on the side of, I want people to be able to make whatever it is somebody's willing to give them. I don't care about anything else. Or at least I care about few things other than that. And he was like, GP, I hear you, but I mean, some of these kids were getting a $2 million NIL deal, and they're not worth it'll be like NIL. You're supposed to be using your name, image, and likeness. And the number attached to that was $2 million. And I'm just telling you that player, in terms of name, image, and likeness, is not worth $2 million. And yet they'd still put it in the contract. And he said, and I got a real problem with that. And I said, that's fine. But will you give me a copy of your contract? Because I bet you in there, you get paid a ridiculous amount of money in your contract for what is considered a weekly coaches show. You know, they put these in all these contracts, or at least they used to. I'm not sure how. Yeah. Okay. So the way, for people who don't know, your base salary for a college basketball coach was nothing, a few $100,000 coming from the university. And then all the rest of it would come from outside entities. And that's how you get John Calipari up to $10 million. But somewhere in that contract, it says the coach is expected to do a weekly radio show, our call-in show on Monday nights on some AM station for $900,000. And I was talking to the coach. I was like, now, do you think your weekly radio show is worth $900,000 to anybody? Because I can just tell you it's not. It's not. All right. But you're not complaining about that. That's just how they justify giving you the money in the paperwork. And it's really no different than this other thing. Yeah, and he was like, okay, you got a good point.
Now,
okay.
I have an affinity for coaches' radio shows, because that's how I got my start.
There you go.
I used to run the board for a local affiliate for ECU football coach Steve Logan. And buddy, let me tell you the kind of calls that would come in. We get to the point where Steve Logan would ask the caller, how much are you giving to the Pirates Club? Look, I remember Roy Williams getting into it with UNC fans while he's chilling out at top of the hill, right? And he is like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. I'm a coach. So there's not anything you can think of that I already have thought of, right? He would get combative with. They actually stopped taking phone calls, by the way.
Oh,
So
yeah.
maybe there was one point in time where Roy Williams fighting with Carolina fans who would tell him, hey, Roy, have you thought about playing Larry Drew a little bit more? Right? Or have you why'd you keep all your timeouts there, Roy?
Oh,
That might be worth some money, but not now. Not now.
My favorite example of those things, and I just know this because of where I grew up, but like as the Phil Fulmer era at Tennessee was turning bad, you would have vol calls every Monday night or whenever it was. And there's some call, like the sentiment's true, whether I'm quoting it exactly right or not. But the sentiment was there. And it's like, and let's go to Jimmy from Cookville. And they're like, hey, Jimmy, you're on the air with Coach Fulmer. And old Jimmy gets on and he's like, Coach Fulmer, I know how much you love the Vols, and I know how much you love the University of Tennessee. It's just as much as I love the University of Tennessee. And Phil Fulmer's like, that's right, Jimmy. Okay. And he said, so Coach Fulmer, the question I got for you, considering how much you love the Tennessee Vols, is if you love the UT Vols as much as we think you do, why don't you just resign and let somebody else do it? It was one of those. It's just like, oh, man.
Look, man,
so,
it's a good way that you bring it up, because I do think it highlights where Carolina basketball is right now.
Yeah.
In that Roy Williams won 3 national championships, and you still had people there at the end saying, for the good of the program, if he loves Carolina as much as he says he does, he needs to resign. And Hubert Davis is now finding the same situation because, again, Carolina guy, Dean guy, Roy, all this other stuff. Nobody loves the university like Hubert Davis does, right? So if you love the university that much, well, then you need to get out of the way. And I'll be curious if it doesn't go the way they want it to, how they'll handle it.
Right.
And I can envision a scenario where Hubert Davis, because he loves the university so much, we were joking about Phil Fulmer and whatnot, and Roy Williams, but I could see Hubert Davis doing that. I can see Hubert Davis saying, look, man, this is not working for me. It's not working for you. And I love the school too much. So I'm just going to step to the side here. And what Carolina does after that is a good question, because they're also going through an AD transition, right? So Bubba Cunningham is going to cycle off into special projects. The special project being, what do we do with Carolina basketball's home? Do we renovate the Smith Center, or do we move to this Carolina North project, which they've been sitting on this land for a very, very long time? And then special project number 2 is, so about the SEC. So those are things that he's working on. What does that dynamic look like with a new AD, with a new Chancellor and Lee Roberts in the direction, clearly they moved heaven and earth to bring Bill Belichick. How far are they willing to go for that next coach, right? And I hate that we're kind of already, right in the end for Hubert Davis at North Carolina. But you and I both know, and I've seen it here locally many times, once that's out, once you let that out, it's very hard to get it back in.
That's right.
Very hard to get it back in. And it's going to take more than just 1 year of winning for this to really go away. He truly has to turn a corner in what has become an increasingly difficult thing to do for consistency in college athletics, right? And they got to start running things. Like, I'll tell you a quick story, because Gilio loves Nate Oates at Alabama.
Sure.
It's like, man, you have all that money. You're the secondary sport in Alabama. You can lose at the high level that they have. And people are like, cool. What's recruiting look like for football, right? So I think the dynamics are a little bit different for Nate. I'm not dismissing Nate. I'm just saying dynamics are different. But he loves Nate Oates, and they're running a professional basketball outfit. And I've had a couple people, I wasn't there for this game, but people have told me, like, when Alabama came to that building, came to the Smith Center, they were like in awe of the operation. Like in awe of the operation. And it's like, well, why is Alabama doing that and you're not?
Right.
That's the thing for Carolina basketball that has been driving me nuts. I think it's been driving Carolina basketball fans nuts. And that's why I say, regardless of what happens on the basketball court this year, it goes beyond the wins and the losses for the health of Carolina basketball going forward. If everybody seems like they're finally on the same page, great. Everybody wins. But the minute there's a hint of, well, you'll start hearing Jim Tanner's contract is not tied to Hubert's contract, all this other kind of stuff, it's already gone.
Right. And
Already
I think that's an important point. And it's something I've subscribed to for a while. It's not a hard and fast rule,
done.
but it's basically true. Once the conversations start, your next bad season is likely your last one. And I don't mean if it happens to be your next season. Tom Crean is a great example of this at Indiana. They were having these conversations about him, like exactly these conversations. Like if he doesn't win big this year, it might be over. And then he won an outright Big Ten title. Okay. So they had to keep him. Then he comes back the following year. Key player, OG Anunoby gets hurt. They're not that good. Boom, they got him. Less than a year after winning an outright Big Ten title, they got him. And it's because they had already decided we have questions about you. The next time we're not satisfied with what you're doing, it's over. And it wasn't the next year. The next year was great. So you get the next one. And if the next year would have been great, he'd have got the next one. But the next bad one was always going to be the last. And I think that's probably true with where we're at right now here.
Well, we saw this play out locally. You don't have to go to Indiana. We saw this play out with Kevin Keats.
There you go.
And as I mentioned, nothing in the triangle happens in a vacuum. And I think to tie this all together, I think Carolina fans might understand where I'm going with this. We're reinventing podcast here, Gary. When games happen, you know what we do? We take phone calls. Nobody's thought to take phone calls after a game. So during this past basketball season, I forgot what stretch of terrible NC State basketball was. We had somebody call our sports phone, and he just said, "Hey, man, Kevin Keats, forever grateful, but get the hell out." Yeah. And that line stuck with us. Hey, forever grateful. Thanks for the ACC championship, the first one since 1987. Shout out to BJ Barham, American Aquarium. I'm sure Matt's heard of these guys. He has an AV cart, and he had 87 on the AV cart. He left a space for the next ACC championship. Okay. For those who aren't familiar, here in the Triangle for the ACC tournament, if you're a certain age, you will remember that they would truck in an AV cart with a television to watch quarterfinal play on a Friday at school. Like, this is a real thing, right? For the old heads out there. So he waited all those years to finally be able to put a 24 on that AV cart. But man, they were ready to go after that. They were forever grateful. And I think that's kind of where we're at with Hubert Davis, in that Heels fans will forever be grateful to Hubert Davis and that 22 squad, because it provided for them the ultimate argument ender. We used to, look, man, you remember, your sports talk radio days, you had a slow week. All you had to do is say, hey, Carolina fans, Duke fans, it's the rivalry, whatever. You've talked to your 8th veteran player from the rivalry that week, telling us some stories and whatnot. And then, all right, let's do a call segment. And the easiest one was, hey, so would you guys ever want to meet like in a Final Four or a championship game? Like, wouldn't that like end the world? We've danced with it, right? Like we danced with it, but we finally got it. And we finally have the answer as to what would happen if they met. And it's the argument ender. Doesn't really matter. Duke might win and they might sweep Carolina this year, but they'll still say, yeah, but here's a sad photo of Mike Krzyzewski saying unacceptable, right? So I think Hubert will always be tied to that year, that run, those memories, and the ultimate argument ender in a rivalry that is on its next chapter right now. I actually like the fact that this Duke-Carolina rivalry is a little spicy again. This is what would cause you guys to tell me that like Louisville and Kentucky was a better rivalry or whatever. Like, get out of here. It was spicier, I get that, but like Duke-Carolina got too cordial with Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski. But because of Hubert and now with John and what happened in the Final Four, it's feisty, man. I mean, I was at Cameron Indoor, 2 years ago when they were just taunting the crazies, and John Shire came over to the crazies and like apologized. Like, I miss that. Like, make juices flow a little bit. So I think all that is in play here, and it shows you once again, you can bring a multi-Super Bowl winner to town to coach your football team. I don't care what they say. You can cosplay being a football team, man. What matters here still is basketball. And if you don't believe me, I mean, it's, mid-August, and we're sitting here still talking about Hubert Davis and what he needs to do this upcoming season.
So let me get you out of here with this. Let's go ahead and get it on the record. I've got North Carolina 25th in the top 25-1.
Okay.
Are you confident that they will maintain a number next to their name much of the season? and do enough in the postseason to where you and I, or more accurately, you and Joe, are never talking about a coaching search in March or April?
So it's interesting. There are two. Sorry, long-winded answer. You can't take the radio guy out of me here. The problem that the ACC is having relative to success for North Carolina is something that I've finally had to admit. League just ain't that good.
Right.
Okay. It's just not that good. I fought it. I really fought it, but it's just not that good. So it's going to be relative. North Carolina has to finish atop the league. They can't have any of this business. You finish second to Duke, hey man, it is what it is. You're still atop the league. But if you let State finish ahead of you, you let Louisville finish ahead of you, because we saw how that quickly got turned around, right?
Yes.
Then we're going to have some problems. We're going to have some problems with Hubert Davis, but that can be solved if you go on a deep NCAA tournament run. I'm talking about getting back to the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, that kind of stuff. You just can't embarrass yourself this year. And what I would say is embarrassing for North Carolina would be finishing behind State and Will Wade in year one. Because if you think Carolina fans are keeping an eye on what's happening with John Shire at Duke, oh, buddy, they are not going to allow you to be second to State, man. They are not going to let that happen. So that's what I would keep an eye on. It's not necessarily maintaining a number, because the reason why I say this, it's kind of an out, sorry, in that I don't think the ACC is going to be good enough for North Carolina to consistently be in the top 25. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're right. It's just they're not going to really be winning anything in the league of note that's going to get people excited. Okay. So I can tell you this. It's not so much a number. It's what's your non-conference looking like? Are you going to do this business again that you're in one possession games against top 25 programs that would easily put you on the other side of the bubble, which was the problem they had last year? You got to win those games in the non-conference, and obviously you got to finish atop the ACC, and then you have to make a deep tournament run. You check all those boxes, Hubert Davis is fine. He'll be back here the following year.
Joe Ovies, you're excellent to be here with me. I appreciate your time. Hopefully, at least for North Carolina's sake, we don't have to have an uncomfortable conversation down the road. But again, the roster is in place, and I think most people expect it to be a national player of the year. If they're still sitting with one quadrant one victory heading into the NCAA tournament, then things have gone wrong. But I don't think either one of us are predicting that again, are we?
No, I'm not predicting that this year. I think they got enough new blood. They got dudes. They got dudes this year. And I think that's going to be that'll put them on the right side of those one possession games.
I would imagine so. Buddy, I appreciate your time. I promise I'm going to bother you again. I'm certain at some point. And if I can ever help you, don't hesitate to ask.
Anytime, man.
You can't count on accurate expiration dates.
No. That is a rookie mistake.
Or the kindness of strangers. But thanks to CBS Sports, you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount+.
Big thank you, Joe Ovies, for joining me to discuss the North Carolina Tar Heels as we get closer and closer to wrapping up this summer shoot-around series. Thanks to you guys for being here. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Shouts to Terry Teagle. He's a legend. Hook and Larnell. Appreciate you guys once again for watching and listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you didn't subscribe, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to podcasts. Apple, Spotify. There's more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So soon. Till then,